The twin suns of the Kira system rose slowly over the green fields of new dawn. The light was warm and golden, and it fell softly on the small houses and farms that spread across the valley. Birds sang in the trees. Children laughed somewhere in the distance. It was a peaceful morning, like every morning on this world. Park Dory had grown up on a world much like this one. He remembered the smell of fresh earth and the sound of his grandmother singing old songs. But that was long ago. Now he was Admiral Park Dory, commander of the frontier fleet, and he was very far from home. His ship, the carrier Unyielding, floated in the cold darkness of space, 3 star systems away from new dawn. He stood on the bridge and looked at the stars through the great window. His hair was gray now, and his face had many lines. 40 years of service had made him tired, but his eyes were still sharp. He thought about retirement sometimes. He thought about finding a quiet place like New Dawn, where he could grow vegetables and watch the sunset. But not yet. Not while there was still work to do. On New Dawn, the morning was busy with activity. Elder Grandmother Yumbora walked slowly down the main street of the colony. She was 94 years old, and her back was bent with age. But her mind was clear, and her heart was full of love for this place and its people. She had come to New Dawn 60 years ago, when she was a young diplomat. Back then, the colony was just a few buildings and a dream. Now it was home to 10,000 humans and 3,000 Velen. The Velen were not human. They had 6 legs and bodies covered in smooth blue-green shell. Their eyes were large and kind, and they spoke in soft, musical voices. When humanity first met them, some people were afraid. But the Velen were gentle creatures. They loved art and music and growing things. They had no weapons and no wars in their history. On New Dawn, humans and Velen had learned to live together. They shared meals and stories. Human children played with Velen young ones. The elders of both species taught the children of both species. It was, Grandmother Yumbora often said, the best thing humanity had ever done. She stopped at the community center and smiled. Inside, she could hear the voices of children. Today was her day to teach the little ones about Earth's history. Both human and Velen children would be there, sitting together, listening to her old stories. A young Velen named Kiri came out to greet her. Kiri's shell was a beautiful shade of green, and her eyes were bright with happiness. "Good morning, Grandmother Yun," Kiri said in her soft voice. "The children are waiting for you." "Then we must not keep them waiting," Grandmother Yumbora said. She took Kiri's offered arm, and together they walked inside. Across the colony, Captain Lee Taiho was having a less peaceful morning. He stood in the defense center, looking at his screens with worried eyes. Something was wrong. Lee Taiho was 42 years old and had been the commander of New Dawn's defense forces for 5 years. It was usually an easy job. The colony had a few small ships and some ground defense weapons, but they had never needed them. New Dawn was far from any conflict. But today, his sensors had detected something strange. Ships, many ships, coming toward the system very fast. "Sir," said his young assistant, a woman named Cho Yuri, "the ships are not in our database. We do not recognize them." Lee Taiho felt cold fear in his stomach. Unknown ships, coming fast, meant only one thing: trouble. "Send a message to the frontier fleet," he said. "Tell Admiral Park Dory we may need help. And start the emergency protocols. I want all civilians ready to move to the shelters." The ships arrived 3 hours later. There were 50 of them. They were black and angular, covered in sharp edges and weapons. They moved through space like predators hunting prey. And when they reached orbit around New Dawn, they stopped and waited. Then a message came. The face on the screen was not human. It was long and pale, with 4 yellow eyes and a mouth full of sharp teeth. The creature wore armor that looked like bone, and it spoke in a voice that was cold and cruel. "I am Warlord Dex of the Keth Dominion," the creature said. "We have watched your world. We have seen the abomination you have created here. Different species living together, sharing resources. It is against the natural order." Li Taiho stood very still. He had heard of the Keth. They were conquerors from the far side of the galaxy. They believed that every species should dominate or be dominated. The idea of cooperation was disgusting to them. "The Valen are weak," Warlord Dex continued. "They are meant to serve. You humans have made them your equals. This cannot be allowed. You will surrender the Velen to us. We will take them to their proper place. If you refuse, we will take them by force." Li Taiho looked at Cho Yuri. She was pale with fear, but her jaw was set with determination. He looked at the other officers in the room. They were all waiting for his answer. He thought about grandmother Yun Bora, teaching children in the community center. He thought about Kiri and all the other Velen who had become friends and neighbors. He thought about what kind of man he wanted to be. "No," he said. Warlord Dex's eyes narrowed. "You refuse?" "The Velen are not our property to give away," Li Taiho said. His voice was calm, but his heart was pounding. "They are our friends, our family. We will not surrender them to anyone." There was silence. Then Warlord Dex smiled. It was an ugly smile, full of teeth. "Then you will die with them," he said. "You have 1 hour to change your mind. After that, we will show you what happens to those who defy the natural order." The screen went dark. Li Taiho immediately sent another message to the Frontier Fleet. This time, it was marked urgent. Far away, on the bridge of the Unyielding, Admiral Park Duri received the message. He read it twice, and his old face became hard as stone. "Set course for the Kira system," he ordered. "Maximum speed." "Sir," said Lieutenant Kim Hana, his young tactical officer. "At maximum speed, we can reach them in 18 hours. 18 hours. Park Duri closed his eyes. It was too long. He knew it was too long. "Go faster," he said quietly. Find a way to go faster. On New Dawn, the hour was almost over. In the community center, Grandmother Yun Bora gathered the children around her. Human and Velen, they looked up at her with scared eyes. "Do not be afraid," she told them. "Help is coming, and until it arrives, we will be brave together. That is what family does." Outside, the Keth warships began to move. Their weapons started to glow with deadly light. The hour was up. The first blast hit the defense center. The building exploded in a ball of fire and smoke, and Captain Li Taiho died instantly. He never saw his wife again. He never held his newborn son. One moment he was giving orders, trying to protect his people. The next moment, he was gone. The Keth did not wait. They did not give warnings. The hour had ended, and now the killing began. Dr. Choi Yoonji was in the medical building when the attack started. She was a small woman with gentle hands and tired eyes. She had spent 20 years healing people on New Dawn. She had delivered babies and cured diseases and held the hands of dying elders. She thought she had seen everything. She was wrong. The explosions shook the building. Windows shattered. People screamed. Yoonji grabbed her medical bag and ran outside. What she saw made her stop and stare. The sky was full of Keth ships. They were everywhere, firing down at the colony. Buildings burned. People ran in all directions, crying for help. And in the streets, Keth soldiers were landing. They came down in metal pods, hundreds of them, and they carried weapons that glowed with cruel light. Yoonji watched a Keth soldier shoot an old man who was trying to run. The man fell and did not move again. Then the soldier laughed. Something cold and hard settled in Yoonji's heart. She raised her medical scanner and pressed the record button. Whatever happened here today, she would make sure the galaxy knew. She would capture every terrible moment. Sergeant Big Ji-woo was 23 years old. She had joined the Defense Forces because she wanted to help people. She had never fired her weapon at a living thing. Today, that changed. She was near the landing pads when the attack started. Around her, other soldiers were dying. The Keth were too fast, too strong, too many. Their weapons cut through armor like paper. But Ji-woo did not run. She gathered the survivors around her, 5 soldiers who were still alive, and she gave them orders. "The shelters," she said. "We need to get the civilians to the shelters." "Move!" They ran through the burning streets. Everywhere, there was death. Ji-woo saw things that would haunt her dreams forever. A mother holding her dead child. An old velen crushed under fallen stone. A young man screaming as Keth soldiers dragged him away. She could not save everyone. She could only save who she could. They reached the community center. The doors were locked, and Ji-woo could hear children crying inside. She pounded on the door. "Open up! We need to evacuate." The door opened. An old woman stood there, small and bent, but with eyes that were calm and clear. It was Grandmother Yoon-bora. "The children are ready," she said. "We have been waiting for you." Inside, Ji-woo saw 40 children. 20 were human. 20 were villain. They sat together in small groups, holding hands. Some were crying. Some were silent with fear. But they were organized. They were ready. Kiri, the young villain, was helping the smallest ones to their feet. Her green shell was dirty with dust, but her voice was gentle. "Come, little ones. We are going to take a trip. Stay together." Ji-woo felt her heart break a little. These children trusted them. These children believed they would be saved. "There is a transport shuttle at the south landing pad," Ji-woo said. "It is small, but it can fly. We need to get everyone there." Grandmother Yoon-bora nodded. "Then lead the way, Sergeant. We will follow." They moved through the streets. Ji-woo went first, her weapon ready. Behind her came the children, then the grandmother and Kiri. The other soldiers protected the rear. They were halfway to the landing pad. When the Keth found them, there were 10 of them. They stepped out of a burning building, their yellow eyes bright with hunger. The leader pointed at the children and said something in a harsh language. "They want the villain," Ji-woo said. "They want to take them." Grandmother Yoon-bora stepped forward. She was tiny next to the armor Keth, but she did not show fear. "You will not have them," she said. "These children are under my protection." The Keth leader laughed. It was the same ugly laugh Yoonji had heard before. The laugh of creatures who enjoyed causing pain. "Old one," the Keth said in broken human language, "you cannot stop us. Move or die." "Then I will die," Grandmother Yoon-bora said. She spread her arms wide, putting herself between the Keth and the children. Her old body was weak. Her bones were thin. But her spirit was stronger than any weapon. The Keth leader raised his gun. "Grandmother, no!" Ji-woo screamed. The shot hit Grandmother Yoon-bora in the chest. She fell backward, but even as she fell, she turned her body to shield the villain children behind her. Her last act was protection. Her last breath was love. Ji-woo screamed and opened fire. Her soldiers joined her. 3 Keth fell before the others returned fire. 2 of Ji-woo's soldiers died. But in the chaos, something important happened. A young human girl, 12 years old, grabbed the hands of the children nearest to her. Her name was Han Minji, and she had been sitting next to Grandmother Yoon-bora all morning, listening to stories about Earth. "This way," Minji whispered. "Follow me. Stay low." She led them through a hole in a nearby wall. One by one, the children crawled through. Kiri helped push them from behind. By the time the fighting stopped, half the children were gone, but not all. The Keth killed the rest. The children who could not run fast enough. The ones who were too scared to move. The ones who stayed to help others. Human and Velen together. They died in the streets of New Dawn. Jiwoo saw it happen. She could not stop it. She was wounded, bleeding from a cut on her head, and she was dragging 3 crying children toward the landing pad. Behind her, she heard the screams. She heard them stop, one by one. Dr. Choi Yoonji was still recording. She hid in the shadow of a broken wall and captured everything. The Keth walking among the bodies. The soldiers laughing and taking pictures. The commander, Warlord Dex himself, walking through the destruction with a smile on his pale face. "Let this serve as an example," Dex said to a camera drone floating beside him. "Species do not mix. The natural order is hierarchy, not harmony. Those who forget this lesson will be reminded." Eunji's hand shook, but she kept recording. At the south landing pad, Jiwoo found the transport shuttle. It was small, meant for 20 passengers. There were 37 survivors trying to fit inside. "We cannot take everyone," the pilot said. He was an old man named Shin Daewon, and his face was wet with tears. "The weight is too much." "Then we leave supplies," Jiwoo said. "Seats, anything we do not need to fly." "Move." They stripped the shuttle bare. They threw out food, water, tools, everything. The children sat on the floor, packed together like cargo. It was still too heavy. Kiri stepped back from the shuttle door. "Leave me," she said. "I will stay." "No." Minji grabbed Kiri's arm. "You have to come, please." "The weight," Kiri said sadly. "It is too much. The children need space." Jiwoo looked at Kiri. She looked at the shuttle. She looked at the sky, where Keth ships were still firing. "Get in," Jiwoo said. "Everyone gets in. We will make it work." She did not know if that was true, but she would not leave anyone behind. Not today. The shuttle lifted off just as Keth soldiers reached the landing pad. They fired at the ship, and Jiwoo felt the hit shake the hull. But old Shin Daewon was a good pilot. He flew hard and fast, pushing the engines beyond their limits. They broke through the atmosphere. They reached space. Behind them, New Dawn burned. Minji sat by a small window, looking back at the planet that had been her home. In her hand, she held her grandmother's pendant. The old woman had given it to her years ago, on her birthday. Now it was all she had left. "The fleet will come," Minji whispered. "They will come, and they will make them pay." 18 hours later, Admiral Park Dury's ship arrived at New Dawn. But by then, there was nothing left to save. The colony was destroyed. The Keth were gone. Only bodies remained. Park Dury stood on the bridge and looked at the burning world. His hands were fists at his sides. His old eyes were filled with something dark and terrible. "Find the survivors," he said. His voice was quiet, but everyone heard the iron in it. "Find them and bring them to me. I need to know what happened here." The shuttle was drifting in space, its engines dead, its power almost gone. When the rescue ships found it, 37 people were still alive inside. They were cold and scared and wounded, but they were alive, and they had a story to tell. The survivors came aboard the Unyielding like ghosts. They were wrapped in emergency blankets, their faces hollow with shock and grief. Medical teams rushed to help them, carrying the wounded on stretchers, guiding the walking to warm beds and hot food. Admiral Park Dury watched from the observation deck. He had seen many terrible things in his 40 years of service. He had fought battles and lost friends. He had made hard decisions that cost lives. But this was different. These were not soldiers. These were children. Sergeant Beat Jiwoo found him there. She had refused medical treatment until she could make her report. Her head was bandaged, and dried blood stained her uniform, but her eyes were clear and determined. "Admiral," she said, standing at attention, "I have a full report of the attack." Park Dory turned to look at her. She was so young. Too young to have seen what she had seen. "At ease, Sergeant," he said gently. "Sit down before you fall down." Ji Woo sat, and then she talked. She told him everything. The ultimatum, the refusal, the attack. She told him about Captain Lee Tai-ho dying in the first blast. She told him about grandmother Yum Bora standing between the Keth and the children. She told him about the laughing. Always the laughing. When she finished, Park Dory was silent for a long moment. Then he asked, "Is there any evidence? Any recording of what they did?" "Yes, sir." Ji Woo pulled a small device from her pocket. "Dr. Choi Yoon-ji gave this to me before she stopped. Swallowed. She did not make it to the shuttle, but she made sure this did." The device was a medical scanner. It held 6 hours of video. Park Dory watched all of it, alone in his quarters, with the door locked. When it was over, he sat in the darkness for a long time. Then he made a call. On Earth, Prime Minister Song Yuna was in a meeting when her assistant interrupted. The assistant was pale and shaking. "Ma'am," he said, "you need to see this. It is from Admiral Park Dory. It is urgent." Song Yuna was 55 years old and had been Prime Minister for 8 years. She had handled crises before. Economic problems, political scandals, border disputes with other colonies. But when she watched the footage from New Dawn, she felt her world change. She saw the Keth soldiers shooting unarmed people. She saw them killing children. She saw grandmother Yum Bora fall, her old body broken, her arms still reaching to protect the little ones behind her. She saw Warlord Dek smiling as he walked through the destruction. When the footage ended, Song Yuna's hands were shaking. Not with fear, with rage. She called an emergency session of the United Human Government Assembly. Within 2 hours, every representative was present. The great chamber was full of people, all waiting to hear what had happened. Song Yuna did not give a speech. She simply played the footage. The chamber was silent as the video played on the great screen. Some people cried. Some looked away. Some watched with hard, angry eyes. When it was over, no one spoke. The silence was heavy with grief and fury. Then Song Yuna said, "There is someone who wants to address the assembly." The chamber doors opened. Lieutenant Kim Hana walked in, leading a small group. In the center of the group was a young girl. She was 12 years old, with black hair and dark eyes. She wore simple clothes, and in her hand she held an old pendant. Han Minji stood before the assembly of all humanity. She was small and scared, but she did not cry. She had promised herself she would not cry. Not until it was over. "My name is Han Minji," she said. Her voice was soft, but the microphones carried it to every corner of the chamber. "I lived on New Dawn. My grandmother's name was Yum Bora. She was 94 years old. She taught children, human children and Velen children. She said that teaching was the most important thing anyone could do." Minji paused. She looked at the pendant in her hand. "When the Kef came, we were in the community center. Grandmother was telling us stories about Earth, about the mountains and the oceans and the old cities. She loved those stories. She said they helped us remember where we came from." Tears were falling now, but Minji's voice stayed steady. "When the soldiers came for us, grandmother stood in front. She was old and small, but she did not move. She said, 'You will not have them.' That is all she said. And then they killed her." The chamber was completely silent. Not a cough, not a whisper, just silence and the voice of a child. "I do not understand," Minji said. I do not understand why they hate us. The Velen are kind. They are gentle. They never hurt anyone. We were just living together. We were just being friends. Why is that wrong? Why did they have to kill my grandmother for that? She looked up at the assembly. Thousands of faces looked back at her. Please, Minji said. Please do something. Please make sure this never happens again. Not to anyone else. Not ever. She had nothing more to say. Lieutenant Kim Hana gently led her away. The chamber remained silent for a full minute after she left. Then Prime Minister Song Yuna stood up. You have seen the footage, she said. You have heard the testimony. The Keth Dominion has murdered our people, our elders, our children. They did it because we dared to live in peace with another species. They did it because they believe in domination, and we believe in cooperation. Her voice grew stronger, harder. I will not stand here and ask what we should do. You all know what we must do. The only question is whether we have the courage to do it. The vote was unanimous. Every representative, every colony, every faction and party. For the first time in human history, the entire species spoke with one voice. The news spread across human space in hours. On every world, on every station, people watched the footage. They saw grandmother Yun Bora die. They saw the children fall. They saw warlord Dex smile. And something woke up in humanity. Something old and powerful and terrible. Recruitment centers were overwhelmed. Soldiers who had retired came back to service. Scientists offered new weapons designs. Engineers worked 20-hour shifts to build ships. Factory workers refused to go home until their quotas were met. On the colony of New Bizen, a grandmother named Park Sujin stood outside a recruitment center. She was 80 years old, too old to fight. But she could cook. She could organize. She could help. I watched the footage, she told a young officer at the desk. That woman who died, Yun Bora, she could have been me. Those children could have been my grandchildren. Tell me how I can help, and I will do it. All across human space, millions of people said the same thing. On the unyielding, Admiral Park Dury received his orders. He was to command the combined human fleet. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon would be under his authority. His mission was simple. Find the Keth. Make them answer for what they had done. Lieutenant Kim Hana came to his quarters to deliver the final reports. She was young, brilliant, and fierce. Her parents had been diplomats. They had taught her to believe in peace. But after watching the footage, she had asked to transfer to combat duty. I have analyzed their tactics, she said, spreading data across his desk. The Keth are conquerors. They have destroyed many species, but they have never faced a unified response. Their strategy depends on fear. They expect their enemies to surrender or scatter. They do not know humanity, Park Dury said quietly. No, sir, they do not. Kim Hana's eyes were hard. They think because we live in peace, we are weak. They think because we cooperate with other species, we are soft. They are wrong. Park Dury nodded slowly. How long until the fleet is ready? 3 weeks, sir. 147 ships. The largest fleet humanity has ever assembled. 3 weeks. It felt like forever. But Park Dury was a patient man. He had waited 40 years for retirement. He could wait 3 more weeks for justice. On the day the fleet departed, Ha Minji was there to watch. She stood on the observation deck of the station, looking out at the ships. They were beautiful and terrible, bristling with weapons, ready for war. Admiral Park Dury found her there. He stood beside her, looking at the same ships. Are you going to kill them? Minji asked. Park Dury thought about his answer carefully. I am going to make sure they can never do this again, he said finally. To anyone, Minji nodded. She held up her grandmother's pendant. Will you take this with you? I want her to be there when you find them. I want her to see. Park Dory took the pendant. It was warm from Minji's hand. He put it in his pocket, over his heart. She will see, he promised. I swear it. The fleet jumped to hyperspace. 147 ships, carrying the fury of an entire species. The Keth had no idea what was coming. The Keth military staging world was called Throne of Bones. It was a dark planet covered in black rock and red dust. The Keth had built their greatest military base there. Hundreds of warships floated in orbit. Thousands of soldiers trained on the surface. It was the heart of their conquest machine. For 200 years, no enemy had come to Throne of Bones. The Keth believed it was untouchable. They believed that the other species of the galaxy were too afraid, too weak, too divided to ever strike back. They were wrong. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace like a storm. 147 ships, their weapons already charging, their shields already raised. They appeared so close to the Keth defense line that the enemy had no time to react. Admiral Park Dory stood on the bridge of the Unyielding, his hands clasped behind his back. In his pocket, he felt the weight of Grandmother Yoon Bora's pendant. He had made a promise. Now it was time to keep it. Open a channel, he said. All frequencies. I want every Keth in this system to hear me. Lieutenant Kim Hana activated the communications array. Her face was pale but determined. She had trained for this moment. She was ready. Park Dory spoke. His voice was calm and clear, carried by radio waves to every Keth ship and station. This is Admiral Park Dory of the United Human Fleet. 6 weeks ago, your forces attacked a peaceful colony called New Dawn. You killed our elders. You slaughtered our children. You did this believing we would cower. You thought we were soft because we choose to live in peace. You thought we were weak because we share our worlds with other species. He paused. When he spoke again, his voice was harder. You were wrong. We are not soft. We are not weak. And we do not forgive those who murder our families. Today, you will learn what humanity does to those who hurt our children. Today, you will understand the cost of your cruelty. He cut the transmission and looked at Kim Hana. Begin the attack. The Battle of Throne of Bones started at exactly 0900 hours. Human Standard Time. It would last 6 hours and 43 minutes. When it was over, nothing would be the same. The first wave was made of fast attack ships, led by Lieutenant Kim Hana herself. She had asked for command of the strike squadron, and Park Dory had given it to her. She was young, but she was brilliant. And she was angry. Her ship, the Swift Vengeance, dove into the Keth formation like a knife. Behind her came 20 more attack ships, each one piloted by someone who had lost friends or family on New Dawn. They were not afraid. They were not cautious. They were hungry. The Keth ships tried to respond, but they were too slow. Kim Hana's squadron tore through their outer defenses, destroying 3 cruisers before the Keth even started firing back. She flew her ship through the wreckage, her hands steady on the controls. Target the command station, she ordered. Take out their communications. The Keth command station was a massive structure floating in high orbit. It controlled all military operations in the system. Destroying it would blind the enemy. Kim Hana led the attack herself. Her ship took hits. Alarms screamed. Smoke filled the cockpit. But she did not turn away. She flew straight at the station, firing everything she had. The station exploded in a ball of fire. Kim Hana's ship was thrown backward by the blast, spinning out of control. For a terrible moment, everyone thought she was dead. Then her voice came over the radio, calm and steady. Station destroyed. Moving to secondary targets. The main fleet hit the Keth line like a hammer. Park Dury had planned the attack carefully. He knew the Keth were strong, but he also knew they were predictable. They fought the same way they had always fought. They expected their enemies to break and run. Humans did not break. Humans did not run. Commander O Sangu was captain of the destroyer Grandmother's Wrath. He had named the ship himself, after his own grandmother, who had died of old age 3 years before. When he heard about New Dawn, he had imagined her dying like Yumbora, protecting children with her last breath. Now he was going to make the Keth pay for every grandmother they had ever hurt. His ship was in the center of the battle, surrounded by enemy vessels. Keth weapons hammered his shields. His crew shouted damage reports. Fire broke out in the engine room. But Sanwu did not retreat. All power to forward weapons, he ordered. Target the flagship. The Keth flagship was the pride of conquest, the personal ship of Warlord Dex. It was the largest vessel in the Keth fleet, covered in weapons and armor. It had destroyed 100 ships in its long career. Today, it would face the Grandmother's Wrath. Sanwu drove his destroyer straight at the flagship. The Keth fired everything they had. His ship shook with impact after impact. Systems failed. Crew members died at their posts. But Sanwu kept going. "Sir," his first officer said, "we cannot survive another hit. We need to pull back." "No," Sanwu said. "We need to get closer." They were almost touching the flagship now. Sanwu could see the Keth bridge through his viewport. He could see the alien officers scrambling in panic. They had never seen anything like this. They did not know how to respond. "Fire," Sanwu said. The Grandmother's Wrath unleashed everything it had left. At this range, there was no defense. The flagship's shields collapsed. Its armor cracked. Explosions ripped through its hull. Sanwu watched it burn. He thought about his grandmother. He thought about all the grandmothers and grandchildren who had died on New Dawn. "This is for them," he whispered. Then a final Keth shot hit his ship, and everything went dark. Sanwu woke up in a medical bay 3 hours later. His ship was destroyed, but rescue teams had found him floating in the wreckage. Half his crew had survived. The other half had died as heroes. The battle was almost over. All across the system, Keth ships were burning. Their stations were destroyed. Their armies were scattered. In 6 hours, the greatest military force in Keth history had been broken. But Warlord Dex had escaped. His flagship had been destroyed, but he had reached an escape pod before the end. Now he was running, fleeing toward Keth space, hoping to reach the homeworld before the humans caught him. Park Dury received the report on his bridge. Around him, his crew was celebrating. They had won. They had proven that humanity could not be pushed around. But Park Dury did not smile. "This is not over," he said quietly. "The war has just begun." He looked at the tactical display. The human fleet had lost 23 ships. Thousands of sailors had died. But the Keth had lost everything at Throne of Bones. Their military power was broken. Now it was time for the next phase. Kim Hannah came to his side. Her uniform was torn and burned, and she had a bandage on her forehead, but her eyes were bright with victory. "Sir," she said, "our scouts have found Dex's escape route. He's heading for the Keth homeworld. We can catch him if we leave now." Park Dury nodded. "Set course for the Keth homeworld. All ships." "Sir, our ships are damaged. Many need repairs. Should we not wait?" Park Dury reached into his pocket and pulled out the pendant. He looked at it for a long moment. "No," he said. "We do not stop. We do not rest. Not until this is finished." The fleet gathered itself. Damaged ships were sent back to human space for repairs. Fresh ships arrived to take their place. Within 48 hours, The human fleet was ready to move again. Park Dury stood on his bridge as the ships jumped to hyperspace. Behind him, Throne of Bones still burned. Ahead of him, the Keth homeworld waited. He thought about Minji, the little girl who had given him this pendant. He thought about grandmother Yumbora, who had died protecting children. He thought about all the dead of New Dawn. "We are coming," he said to no one. "We are coming, and we will not stop." The stars stretched into lines, and the fleet vanished into the void. The reckoning was not complete. It would end at the Keth homeworld. It would end with Warlord Dex in chains. It would end with the Keth understanding, finally, what happened when you hurt humanity's children. In the medical bay, Commander O Sangwoo woke up again. A nurse was checking his bandages. "Did we win?" he asked. "We won the battle," the nurse said. "The war is not over yet." Sangwoo nodded. He closed his eyes and thought about his grandmother. She had always told him to finish what he started. "Then wake me when we get there," he said. "I want to see the end."